Julia, seriously? You're still using that ancient phone from 2018? My brother Harrison laughed, holding up his brand new iPhone as we gathered around the Christmas tree in my parents' living room in Portland, Oregon. Look at this thing. It's practically a fossil. My name is Julia Thompson. I'm 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the family disappointment. While my siblings splurged on designer clothes, luxury gadgets, and expensive dinners, I clipped coupons, shopped at thrift stores, and lived in a tiny studio apartment on the outskirts of town. What my family didn't understand was that every dollar I saved was a dollar invested in something bigger than they could imagine. It still makes calls and sends texts, I replied calmly, tucking my old phone back into my secondhand purse. That's all I need. My sister Brenda rolled her eyes dramatically, adjusting her new Cartier watch. Julia, you're 28 years old and you dress like you're shopping in our grandmother's closet. Don't you want nice things? The room fell into that familiar pattern of judgment I had grown accustomed to over the years. My mother, Margaret, sighed deeply while arranging expensive ornaments on the tree. Honestly, Julia, it's embarrassing sometimes. When people ask about my daughters, Brenda works in marketing for a prestigious firm and drives a BMW. And then there's you with your part-time jobs and extreme couponing. My father, David, nodded in agreement from his leather recliner. We raised you better than this, sweetheart. There's being financially responsible, and then there's whatever this is. You act like you're living through the Great Depression. Harrison smirked as he scrolled through his expensive tablet. Remember when she brought her own tea bags to that upscale restaurant for my birthday? The waiter didn't know what to do with himself. The laughter that followed felt like tiny needles pricking my skin, but I had learned to endure it. What they couldn't see was the purpose behind every sacrifice, every moment of ridicule I endured, while they lived paycheck to paycheck despite their impressive salaries. While they accumulated debt to maintain their lifestyles, I was building something extraordinary in the quiet hours after my part-time shifts ended. I'm doing just fine, I said softly, watching as Harrison's girlfriend Kelly joined in the mockery by showing off her designer shoes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Little did they know that in just a few minutes, Harrison would accidentally stumble upon information that would flip their entire world upside down. The phone they mocked was about to reveal a secret that would transform their laughter into desperate pleas and their condescension into shocked silence. The mockery continued as we moved to the dining room for dinner. Brenda made a show of photographing her expensive meal for social media while commenting on how I had brought my own bottled water instead of buying the sparkling water my mother served. Julia's always been different, Margaret explained to Kelly, Harrison's girlfriend, as if I weren't sitting right there. Even as a child, she would save her allowance instead of spending it like normal kids. We thought she'd grow out of it, but here we are. I picked at my dinner, remembering the countless nights I had worked on my project instead of socializing. While my family attended expensive concerts and took lavish vacations they couldn't afford, I spent my evenings in my tiny apartment, surrounded by coding books and my laptop, developing what would become the most successful budgeting app of the decade. The worst part is that she has a computer science degree, David added, cutting his prime rib. She could get a real job at a tech company, but instead, she works part-time at that bookstore and does freelance work. It's like she's wasting her potential. What they didn't know was that my freelance work was actually the development and maintenance of FrugalSmart, an app I had created that helped millions of people manage their finances better. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family, who desperately needed financial management, had no idea their embarrassing daughter had created the very solution to their problems. Harrison pulled out his phone to show Kelly photos from his recent ski trip to Aspen. This cost me $8,000, but you only live once, right? He glanced at me with pity. Julia probably thinks I'm crazy for spending that much on a vacation. I think you should spend your money however makes you happy, I replied honestly. What I didn't add was that his $8,000 vacation was less than what I earned in passive income each day from my app. Kelly looked at me curiously. What kind of freelance work do you do, Julia? App development, I said simply, not wanting to elaborate. The truth was too complex and too unbelievable for this crowd. Oh, like making little games? Brenda asked dismissively. That's cute. Margaret shook her head sadly. We keep hoping she'll meet a nice man with a stable career who can take care of her properly. Someone who can show her what it's like to live a little. The conversation continued around me, each comment adding to the mountain of assumptions they had built about my life. They saw my thrift store clothes and secondhand furniture and concluded I was struggling. They saw my modest lifestyle and assumed I was failing. What they couldn't see was the empire I had built from my laptop, one line of code at a time. After dinner, we gathered in the living room to exchange gifts. I watched as my family opened expensive presents they had bought for each other on credit cards they were still paying off from previous year's celebrations. My gifts, while thoughtful, were modest by comparison. Homemade cookies, a book I had found at an estate sale, and a scarf I had knitted myself. These cookies are actually really good, Harrison admitted, taking a third one. Did you use that ancient oven in your apartment? The same one, I nodded, amused by how he couldn't conceive that someone might choose to live simply rather than be forced to by circumstances. As the evening wound down, Harrison excused himself to use the bathroom. My phone, which I had left charging on the kitchen counter, buzzed with notifications. Without thinking, Harrison picked it up, probably intending to hand it to me, but the screen lit up with my banking app still open from earlier, when I had checked my account balance. I watched from the living room as his face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then complete shock. He stared at the screen for a long moment, his mouth slightly open, before looking toward the living room where I sat. "Julia," he called out, his voice strangely hollow. "Can you come here for a second?" The tone of his voice made everyone in the living room look up. Margaret and David exchanged glances, probably expecting Harrison to share another story about my frugal habits. Brenda continued scrolling through her phone, and Kelly looked mildly curious. I walked into the kitchen, already knowing what Harrison had seen. My banking app displayed my current account balance, $12,347,892.73. Below that were notifications about my daily earnings from FrugalSmart, my investment portfolio updates, and transfer confirmations from my business accounts. "Is this real?" Harrison whispered, holding up my phone with trembling hands. "This can't be real." I took my phone from him calmly. "What are you talking about?" "The money, Julia. There are $12 million in your account. $12 million. His voice cracked slightly. "How is that possible?" The living room had gone completely quiet. I could feel everyone's attention turning toward the kitchen, sensing that something significant was happening, but not yet understanding what. Harrison's face had gone pale. "All this time, we thought you were struggling, that you were too proud to ask for help, that you needed us to worry about you. But you're rich. You're actually rich." The moment hung in the air like a soap bubble about to burst. I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath from the living room, could sense the shift in the atmosphere as Harrison's words sank in. This was the moment everything would change. The moment my carefully maintained secret would explode their preconceptions and reveal the truth they never bothered to discover. "What did you just say?" Margaret's voice cut through the silence as she appeared in the kitchen doorway, David and Brenda close behind her. The color had drained from her face as she looked between Harrison and me. Harrison held up my phone again, his hands still shaking. "Mom, Dad, you need to see this. Julia has $12 million. $12 million. The kitchen erupted into chaos. Brenda pushed past everyone to grab my phone, her eyes widening as she saw the account balance. "This has to be fake. There's no way. Julia, is this some kind of joke app?" "Give me that," David demanded, snatching the phone from Brenda's hands. His reading glasses slipped down his nose as he studied the screen. "These numbers, These can't be real. I stood calmly in the center of the storm, watching as my family processed information that contradicted everything they believed about me. Margaret gripped the kitchen counter, her knuckles white. Julia, explain this right now. Where did this money come from? I developed an app, I said simply. It's been quite successful. An app? Harrison's voice pitched higher. What kind of app makes $12 million? A budgeting app called Frugal Smart. Maybe you've heard of it. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as recognition dawned on their faces. Frugal Smart wasn't just any app. It was the app that had been featured on every major financial news show, the one that had disrupted the personal finance industry, the one that celebrities and financial experts recommended. Brenda's mouth fell open. You're telling me that you created Frugal Smart? The app that Oprah talked about? The one that was on the cover of Time magazine? The same one, I confirmed, taking my phone back from David's limp grasp. Margaret stumbled backward, catching herself against the wall. But you live in that tiny apartment. You shop at thrift stores. You clip coupons like some kind of person who understands the value of money, I finished. The app teaches people to live below their means, to save and invest wisely. I practice what I preach. Harrison ran his hands through his hair, pacing in the small kitchen. All this time, while we were giving you advice about getting your life together, you were sitting on $12 million? While you were laughing at my lifestyle choices and calling me an embarrassment, I corrected. Yes. David's businessman facade cracked completely. Julia, honey, if we had known... You would have treated me differently, I interrupted. Which is exactly why I didn't tell you. Kelly, who had been silent through the entire revelation, finally spoke up. So when Harrison spent $8,000 on that ski trip, you could have paid for it without even noticing? I nodded. I make more than that in daily passive income from the app. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. Every joke about my old phone, every comment about my thrift store clothes, every expression of pity for my supposed financial situation, all of it had been based on complete ignorance of my actual circumstances. Brenda's expression shifted from shock to something calculating. Julia, this changes everything. We're family. Family should support each other. I raised an eyebrow. Support each other? Like how you supported me when you called my lifestyle embarrassing at every family gathering? That was different, Margaret said quickly, her tone becoming wheedling. We were just concerned about you. We wanted what was best for you. What's best for me apparently wasn't good enough for you, I replied, until you found out it came with a bank balance you approved of. The transformation in my family's behavior was immediate and nauseating to watch. Within minutes of discovering my wealth, the same people who had spent years mocking my choices were suddenly full of praise and newfangled concern. You know what, Julia? I always admired your discipline, David said, his voice taking on a tone I had never heard before. Your mother and I were just saying the other day how smart you were to live so modestly. I almost laughed at the blatant lie. Really? Because 30 minutes ago you said my lifestyle was embarrassing. Margaret jumped in quickly. We were just worried about you, sweetheart. We thought you were struggling and we didn't know how to help without hurting your pride. My pride? I repeated incredulously. You thought calling me an embarrassment in front of strangers was protecting my pride? Harrison, who had been suspiciously quiet, suddenly perked up. Julia, I've actually been working on this amazing business idea. It's a social media platform for extreme sports enthusiasts. I just need some startup capital, maybe $2 or $3 million to get it off the ground. There it was. Less than 10 minutes after discovering my wealth, and the requests were already starting, Brenda chimed in eagerly. And I've been looking at this amazing condo downtown. It's only $1.5 million, which is nothing for you now. I could pay you back gradually. Pay me back with what money? I asked. Last I heard, you were maxed out on your credit cards. Her face flushed. That's exactly why I need this opportunity. The condo would be an investment. Property values are only going up. Kelly, emboldened by the conversation, stepped forward. Julia, I don't know if Harrison mentioned it, but we've been talking about getting married. A small wedding would be nice. Maybe something in Tuscany. I've seen venues there for around $300,000. You want me to pay for your wedding? I asked, turning to look at Harrison. The same brother who just 20 minutes ago was making fun of my phone? Harrison had the grace to look slightly ashamed. Look, I'm sorry about that. I didn't understand what you were doing. But now that I do, we should support each other's dreams, right? Margaret nodded enthusiastically. Family money should be family money. That's how these things work. You can't just keep it all to yourself. The audacity was breathtaking. I looked around at these people who had spent years making me feel small and inadequate, who had pitied me and patronized me, and who were now standing in my parents' kitchen with their hands out like I owed them something. Let me understand this correctly, I said slowly. Yesterday, my lifestyle was so embarrassing that you apologized to strangers for my behavior. Today, you want me to fund your dreams with the money I earned from that same embarrassing lifestyle. David stepped forward with his most paternal expression. Julia, we're your family. Everything we have, we share. That's what family means. Everything you have? I laughed. What exactly are you offering to share with me? Your debt? Your financial stress? Your inability to live within your means? That's not fair, Brenda protested. We work hard for our money. And I didn't work hard for mine? I asked. You think $12 million just appeared in my account by magic? You think I built a successful company by accident while you all assumed I was failing? The kitchen had become a battlefield, with my family on one side demanding access to wealth they had just discovered, and me on the other side, finally seeing them clearly for who they really were. The confrontation reached a boiling point when my extended family arrived. Word had apparently spread quickly through our family network, because within an hour, my parents' house was full of relatives I hadn't seen in months, all suddenly very interested in my well-being. Uncle Robert, who had always treated me like the family failure, was now patting me on the back and calling me kiddo, like we had always been close. Julia, I've got this fantastic investment opportunity in renewable energy. It's a sure thing, and I know you'd want to get in on the ground floor. Cousin Patricia, who had made snide comments about my thrift store wardrobe at the last family reunion, was now gushing about how authentic and grounded I was. I've always said you were the smartest one in the family. I have this online boutique that just needs a little capital injection to really take off. My grandmother, who had arrived in what must have been record time, sat me down on the couch and took my hands in hers. Julia, dear, I'm so proud of you. I always knew you were special. Now, your grandfather and I have been struggling a bit with the medical bills, and I was wondering... I stood up abruptly, unable to listen to another word. The living room was packed with family members, all with their own sob stories and business plans, all suddenly treating me like the golden child they had never seen me as before. Enough, I said loudly, cutting through the chatter. All of you, just stop. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. 6 months ago, at Brenda's birthday party, half of you made jokes about my poverty mindset. Uncle Robert, you told people I was wasting my computer science degree. Patricia, you asked Mom if I needed help buying real clothes. Grandma, you suggested I was too stubborn to accept help from the family. I looked around the room at their suddenly uncomfortable faces. Not one of you bothered to ask what I was actually doing with my life. Not one of you considered that maybe, just maybe, I knew what I was doing. You all assumed that, because I didn't live the way you thought I should, I must be failing. Margaret tried to interrupt. Julia, honey, I'm not finished, I said firmly. Now, in the span of 2 hours, you've asked me for $17 million collectively. Harrison wants money for a business he hasn't even researched properly. Brenda wants a condo she can't afford. Kelly wants a wedding in Italy for a relationship that's 6 months old. Uncle Robert wants to invest in renewable energy despite knowing nothing about the industry. Patricia thinks I should fund her boutique that's already failing. The silence was deafening. Here's what's really interesting, I continued. Not one of you has apologized for years of treating me like I was an embarrassment to the family. Not one of you has acknowledged that your judgment was completely wrong. Instead, you've decided that now that I have money, I owe it to you. David stood up, his face red with frustration. Julia, we're your family. We love you. We've always loved you. I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation, the complete lack of self-awareness, the shameless entitlement. It was all so ridiculous that laughter was the only appropriate response. You love my money, I said between laughs. Yesterday you were embarrassed by me. Today you love me. The only thing that changed was a number in my bank account. Harrison stepped forward, desperation creeping into his voice. Julia, come on. We can work this out. We're sorry if we hurt your feelings, but we're family. This is what families do for each other. My laughter stopped abruptly. No, Harrison. This is what you want families to do for you. I looked around the crowded living room, at faces that had transformed from mockery to greed in the span of 2 hours. The same people who had spent years making me feel small and inadequate were now staring at me with naked desperation, their hands metaphorically extended, waiting for me to solve problems they had created through their own financial irresponsibility. You know what the funniest part is? I said, my voice cutting through the tense silence. Every single one of you needs my help because you've made terrible financial decisions. Harrison, you've blown through 3 jobs in 2 years because you keep taking expensive vacations instead of focusing on your career. Brenda, you're drowning in credit card debt because you buy designer clothes to post on Instagram. Mom and Dad, you're approaching retirement with almost nothing saved because you've spent decades trying to keep up with your neighbors. I watched their faces as the truth hit home. I created an app that teaches people to avoid exactly the mistakes you've all made. And instead of learning from it, instead of asking for advice, you mocked me for living the lifestyle that made my success possible. Margaret's voice was pleading now. Julia, we made mistakes. We can admit that. But family forgives. Family helps each other. Family respects each other, I shot back. Family doesn't spend years tearing someone down and then expect a bailout when it's convenient. I walked to the front door and opened it wide. The December air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of snow and the promise of a fresh start. Here's my final answer to all of your requests, I said, turning back to face the room full of shocked relatives. No. No to the business investments, no to the condo, no to the wedding, no to the medical bills, and no to every other hand you're going to stick out. You can't be serious, Harrison said, his voice cracking. Dead serious. The same determination you all mocked is the same determination that's going to keep my money exactly where it is, with the person who earned it. The explosion of outrage was immediate and predictable. This is ridiculous, Uncle Robert shouted, his face turning purple. You can't just hoard wealth while your family struggles. Watch me, I replied calmly. Brenda burst into tears, though I suspected they were more manipulative than genuine. Julia, I'm your sister. How can you just abandon me? The same way you abandoned me every time someone asked about your embarrassing sister, I answered. Harrison made one last desperate attempt. Julia, if you do this, you'll regret it. Family is all we have. Money doesn't last forever. I smiled at him, the same brother who had made fun of my phone just hours earlier. You're right, Harrison. Family is all we have. Which is why it's so important to choose wisely. The implications of my words hung in the air. I wasn't just refusing their requests. I was cutting them off entirely. "You're making a huge mistake," David said, his voice cold with anger. "We won't forget this." "Good," I replied. "I hope you remember it every time you're tempted to judge someone based on their appearance or lifestyle choices." Patricia tried a different approach. "Julia, think about what your success could mean for the whole family. We could all be better together." "We could have been better all along," I said. "But you chose mockery over support, judgment over curiosity, and assumptions over actual conversation. That was your choice. This is mine." I gestured toward the open door. "I have work to do. My app won't manage itself, and unlike some people, I believe in earning what I have." One by one, they filed out, their faces showing various combinations of shock, anger, and disbelief. Harrison was the last to leave, pausing at the door to look back at me. "This isn't over, Julia." "Yes," I said, closing the door firmly behind him. "It is." In the months that followed, my family faced the harsh consequences of their years of poor financial decisions and cruel treatment. Harrison's attempt to launch his extreme sports social media platform failed spectacularly when investors realized he had no actual business plan beyond people like extreme sports. He burned through his remaining savings trying to convince venture capitalists to fund his half-baked idea, ultimately having to move back in with our parents when he couldn't make rent. Brenda's financial situation deteriorated rapidly without the bailout she had expected, forcing her to declare bankruptcy and move into a studio apartment while working 2 part-time jobs to pay off her massive credit card debt. Margaret and David discovered that their retirement dreams were impossible without my financial support, requiring them to continue working well into their 70s while watching their friends enjoy the golden years they had assumed my money would provide. The extended family members who had shown up with their hands out found themselves dealing with their own financial crises without the safety net they had taken for granted, learning too late that entitlement and poor planning make for a toxic combination. As I sat in my home office that evening, surrounded by the same modest furnishings that had once been a source of family shame, I reflected on how their mockery had ultimately strengthened my resolve and sharpened my focus on what truly mattered. The revenge wasn't in denying them money. It was in proving that the lifestyle they had ridiculed was actually the foundation of genuine success and happiness.